Pokemon Colosseum is a really, really good console RPG Pokemon game. And could it fit onto an N64 cartridge? That is the question we're going to ask today. This is the next video in that series, so pretty much, before we even begin, I just want to put a disclaimer. I have no background whatsoever on like computer technology stuff. What I do understand is that if you take stuff out of a game, it makes the storage or RAM capacity smaller. That's what I do understand. So without further ado, could Pokemon Colosseum fit onto an N64 cartridge? Well, if we stick on this model, what we did for the very first episode, and sort of the second episode, is Resident Evil 2 was a 2-disc PS1 game that was combined 1.4 gigabytes that fit onto a 64 megabyte cartridge. So we're trying to keep the game size relatively under that or around that. Now, I've seen stuff about how the GameCube discs are 1.5 gigabytes each. Pokemon Revolution for the Wii was 1.26 gigabytes. Considering it had a lot more than this game, we're going to assume, as I couldn't find an exact number on how big this game is, I know it is like around just over 50 blocks, which is the storage size that the GameCube uses. But again, statistically, I couldn't find an exact number of what its memory file size was, how big the game was. So my guess is it's somewhere underneath 1.2 gigabytes is what I would say. But to fit onto a 64 megabyte cartridge, it's very similar to a game like Pokemon Stadium 2. And that game had entire battle mode, not an RPG. Now, what was Pokemon Colosseum supposed to be? My guess was it was supposed to be based off of Pokemon RPG that was canceled, but was for the 64 DD, which was the add-on for the Nintendo 64. That's what my guess is. Maybe that's what became Pokemon Colosseum, or even its follow-up Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness. So yeah, I'm not entirely sure, but I do want to talk about what could we shrink down. But first, of course, we got to talk about the controller. Now, this system might actually be one of the easiest and smallest to do, but the controller is honestly very easy to figure out. You have your joystick there in the middle that allows you to move, your A button is talk, and your pause button opens up your inventory to go to your Pokemon, save and exit the game. So that sort of thing. Very, very easy. In battle, like Pokemon Stadium 2, you use the C buttons and you hold the R button on the top right there to go ahead and look at what the move does, look what your Pokemon stats are, what your Pokemon does, that sort of thing. That's what that would be. It's pretty much the exact same controls as Pokemon Stadium 2, except again, your joystick is what moves Wes and the girl around. Pretty easy. So now what we have to talk about is that this game is very similar to Pokemon Stadium 2. We kind of have to change stuff up. First off, Pokemon Colosseum is in the 3rd generation, so the transfer pack that you use automatically has to be able to be A, used in this game so that you can transfer your Pokemon, and B, has to now have access to Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. But it's going to use a little bit different. It's going to use the Ruby, Sapphire Pokedex because there's a lot less Pokemon. In the Emerald, there's like over 300, I believe, whereas in Ruby, Sapphire, there's 202 Pokemon. Pokemon Stadium 2 has both Gen 1 and Gen 2 Pokemon, meaning it has 251. If that game can fit 251, why can't we? So I looked at the Ruby Sapphire Pokedex, and again, we want to keep all the Ruby Sapphire new Pokemon. So I looked at the Ruby Sapphire Pokedex, and I thought, okay, so what are the old Pokemon that are still in this game, in this dex? We have the Abraline, Magikarp, Goldeen, Azurill, Geodude, Zubat, Tentacool, Machop, Magnemite, Voltorb, Oddish, plus its Blossom evolution, Doduo, Grimer, Koffing, Sandshrew, Skarmory, Igglybuff, Staryu, Vulpix, Pichu, Psyduck, Wynaut, only Wynaut though, of course Wobbuffet was in Gen 2, Natu, Girafarig, Phanpy, Pinsir, Heracross, Rhyhorn, Corsola, Chinchou, Horsea, Slugma, and those were all the Pokemon that they kept in Gen 3, Ruby Sapphire Pokedex. But that's only 202. We can fit a couple more. Now, there are some Pokemon in the Colosseum that are not in the Ruby Sapphire Dex. So, looking at the ones that are both not in the Ruby Sapphire Dex, including the older Pokemon from Gen 1 and 2, and the ones that were added, we have Chikorita, Cyndaquil, Totodile, Hoot, Hoppip, Mareep, Wooper, Misdreavus, Sentret, Yanma, Remoraid, Mantine, Quillfish, Dunsparce, Sudowoodo, Tyrogue, the triple legendary dogs Entei-Reiko Suicune, Ladybug, Gligar, Stantler, Swinub, Sneasel, Aipom, Murkrow, Fortress, Ariados, Gramble, Sunflora, Delibird, Miltank, Houndour, Tyranitar, Smeargle, Ursaring, Shuckle, Togepi, and Ho-Oh. That adds a total of 67 Pokemon, which means we have 269 Pokemon in the game, which is over our 251 limit. And again, if we want it to be relatively close, obviously graphics are going to have to be de-enhanced, that sort of thing. If we want it to be close to the Pokemon Stadium 2 storage, which is used as 64 megabytes, we have to take some Pokemon out to get to that 251 limit. So I decided, well, there are obviously a lot of sweet Pokemon in Gen 3 and 2. They added up quite a lot of weak Pokemon, especially ones that are only like 1 or 2 evolutions, so I thought, why don't we take those out? So the Pokemon I'm going to be taking out, which we have to take out a total of 18 to get to the 251, the ones I'm going to be taking out are Misdreavus, Sunflora, Aipom, Murkrow, Quillfish, the Swinub line, Stantler, Yanma, the Hoppip line, Gramble line, Ladybug line, and Dunsparce. That'll give us a total of 251 Pokemon, meaning the exact amount of Pokemon that was in Pokemon Stadium 2. So it works out completely fine. Now another thing right off the bat, again, before we get into the actual story of the game, is that it'll utilize the Mount Battle, which in the middle of the game you go to Mount Battle and it's like, oh, you can battle this to train up the Pokemon and level up and get a bunch of rewards. It has 100 levels. I think what we're going to do is we're going to cut that down to 40 levels. Pretty much what it'll be is the first 10 levels will be level 15, the next 10 will be level 30, then level 45, and then finally level 60 to finish it off, as the highest level Pokemon I believe in the game is the level 60 that you fight at the end of the game. Pretty easy, pretty simple, but yeah, cutting like 60 levels definitely saves so much memory space for all the Pokemon that those people in Mount Battle have, all their moves, all that sort of thing. Now, I think the story can stay relatively the same with one small little change, and that is the Pokemon Lab section. I was trying to look at the story and what the smallest part of the game is, not including the start and the battles and whatnot. Well, what I discovered was the Pokemon Lab, where you meet one of the admins, is actually the smallest part of the game, the smallest area, main quest sort of area. So if we take that out completely, meaning we take out the admin, meaning later on in the game when you have to refight that admin, we take him out, that makes it completely so much easier. It removes quite a lot of storage for that game. As well, besides the Mount Battle, there are other stadium, like Colosseum, I believe they're called Colosseums. I played Pokemon Stadium a lot more, so I'm going to call them stadiums. If I do, that's my bad. But the Colosseums in the game, there is one in Phoenix City, in the Underground, in Pyrite Town. I think those are the only 3. If we keep one, like in Phoenix City, that's like clearly the biggest looking city, and Pyrite Town, I think that's fine. The Underground really didn't need its own, so if we keep 2 of the Colosseums and remove the other one, that's probably fine. There are a lot of also useless NPCs. Again, I don't know where they all are. I just played the game like a month ago, so it's still fresh in my mind, but I still don't know the name and whatnot of every single NPC. If we cut that out, I'm sure that's fine. But a big change I want to add is the daycare. The daycare, you can only use 1 Pokemon. We want to add that to 2 because of breeding. The reason why is certain Pokemon that are in Pokemon Colosseum are not in, of course, the Ruby Sapphire decks. But if you're going to use the transfer packs, transfer your own teams over, and we'll get there. And the reason why is we'll get there because the main game is just an RPG. There's no stadium modes like in Pokemon Stadium 1 and 2. But if you want to use those Pokemon in the Ruby Sapphire decks, you kind of have to be, because some Pokemon, for example, you get a Ladian, not a Ladybug. So you might want to breed it and get a Ladybug instead, if that makes sense. So that's why you have to add those 2. Again, kind of complicated, but there we go. I know we did say we were taking out Ladybug, but still. But yeah, I think that's all that I would change about the RPG part of the game. Take out the entire Pokemon Lab part, take out the admin for that area, take out the 2 Colosseums the 1 Colosseum in the Underground, keep the other 2. Take out a bunch of Pokemon, make it down to 251 instead of 269. Make Mount Battle go from 100 battles to 40, and that's it. The other thing, though, is when you first enter the game, there is another option to just do straight battles. We're going to change that up a little bit. That is where you'll be able to add your own teams and whatnot. And the only thing that'll do is you can just battle. pretty much the way it works, I think there's different rule sets, whatever. No, the only way to play that mode is you have to use your own Pokemon, and so that you can battle and use them in 3D. I think that's fine. I think that would work well. So this game is straight up, like I said, Pokemon 64 or Pokemon RPG 64. That, again, this potentially is what became for the N64 DD. It's exclusively just an RPG, not a battle mode, not a camera game. It's just exclusively an RPG. And the only way to battle using your own teams is you just upload them from the transfer pack, and maybe they start level 50, they're only level 50, whatever. That's how that works. And I think that's all the big changes I want to do. So I think that's how we could get Pokemon Colosseum to fit onto an N64 cartridge. Once again, guys, I hope you did enjoy, and let me know down in the comments below if you have any ideas on what game I should cover, and if we could somehow fit it onto a smaller, cartridge or disc size, say for like a GameCube game being on N64 like this one, or maybe a Wii game onto a GameCube game, something like that. Let me know your suggestions down below. But I hope you guys enjoyed nonetheless. Maybe leave a like, maybe leave a nice comment down below, maybe hit that subscribe button, retain that little bell, and I'll see you guys next time for another Can We Shank This Game Down? The series, I guess that's what we'll call it. Bye, guys!